Power to the people. It is November 1st, and I want to talk about kind of what's going on in my mind, in my life right now. I'll be 62 November 15th, and I've lived a pretty good life, had a lot of fun, did some interesting stuff, and I feel a lot younger than my age. I feel at least 20 years younger. Since I was young, a teenager, I've been aware of what's going on in the world, and I've been involved in varying degrees at different levels in struggles for liberation. Now here we are under a mature fascist state with a passive general population whom I consider as Nazi Americans, not necessarily SS Nazis, but still being passive and obedient to the dictates of the government, not being involved socially and politically. And I believe that that general behavior, that general attitude could be the downfall for this country. If we remember, prior to 9/11, all the wrongdoings that the U.S. regime had been doing in the Middle East, say in Iraq, not even going into all the evils that have been done in the name of the U.S. people in Latin America. Then along came 9/11. That was a shock to many people. And at the time, I remember I was online, and I turned off some folks that day, as I typed up that the rooster had come home to roost. The U.S. regime, in the name of its people, cannot lightly go out and destroy other civilizations, especially in Iraq. Iraq was kind of the cradle of civilization. Hello? And the U.S. regime and its people cannot willy-nilly go out and attack other countries and seek oil, try to rip off other people's natural resources by force, by violence, by terrorism, and not expect any repercussions. This is common sense. Common sense may be a rare quality at times. Yet we have to understand that when people in other countries, and many of them do, hate Americans and even though other countries know that they cannot now, say, overthrow the U.S. government. You know, the U.S. regime has the strongest, biggest military force in the world. In fact, the military budget is at the bottom root of our social ills in this country. It costs billions of dollars to be maintaining this evil empire. And it is evil. So I cannot simply excuse Americans, spelled with a K, Americans, with the idea that, well, they're just ignorant and they don't know. That might have been true before 9/11, but not now. Hell, when 9/11 happened, most Americans didn't even know where Iraq was. They couldn't distinguish, you know, Iraq or Iran. It's just over there somewhere in the Middle East around. I guess that's by Jerusalem or something. So we learn world geography by the wrongdoings that the U.S. regime does. Another thing to keep in mind too is that when nervous habit, when people talk about the evil deeds of the U.S. empire, or the American empire, the U.S. rogue regime, but most know as the U.S. government. I've even heard so-called, well, progressive activists say, you know, we bombed over here and we invaded over here. You know, who's that we? I haven't bombed anybody. I haven't invaded anybody. You know, so there's an example of how fascism has embedded itself into the psyche of the American people. When we, as, say, U.S. citizens, figure that what the U.S. government does is what we do. Definitely not me personally. You know, Obama's never asked my opinion about foreign policy, about surges. So to transform this whole situation, we will need to disidentify, not identify with that which we wish to get rid of. And it's not just illogical, it's something wrong with our cognition when we do that. You know, so we really need to understand, you know, am I the U.S. government? No. I'm not a government employee. You know, I'm not in the Obama administration. So we need to disconnect from any personal identification with the American empire. lot of what's wrong is that people's thinking is messed up. You know, they can't even correctly see connected reality. They cannot see that the USA is not truly a democracy. You know, the barrios, the Mexican barrios, say the black ghettos, and even poor white communities, you know, if they're mainly one particular so-called race, you know, we're internal colonies of the U.S. empire, existing in the interior of the U.S. borders. You know, we're not truly an independent sovereign nation controlled by the majority will. And everything is interconnected with everything else. Like, say, in terms of politics, if we do not really have a democracy here, you know, we can say, well, why not? A lot of it has to do with how you define democracy. I define democracy by majority rule. We have what's called a so-called representative democracy, which means that the theory is we elect these people to represent us in Congress, or city council, board of supervisors. Yet when we look closely at that, especially on a federal level, you know, there are so many restrictions to people really having a say-so in what's going on. If you want to run for, say, a federal office, you got to be rich. You might as well forget it. Like, who's going to run in 2016? You know, so far we got Jesse Ventura, and he'll be lucky if he can make a dent, because electoral politics in the USA is controlled by corporations. The two-headed monster of the Democratic and Republican parties are controlled by corporations who invest in candidates that they want to see in power. And unless you got $1 billion to throw away, you're not going to win the presidency. Let alone dealing with the psyche of the American people who cannot think outside the box, who cannot think outside of, you know, being a Democrat or being a Republican, who cannot think outside of being left-wing or being right-wing. See, it's our own consciousness that constricts our mentality. You know, we can't blame everything on the fascist pigs and all that. I mean, we got to take responsibility for our own lives. We need to have a true participatory democracy, when we participate in elections, participate in bringing forth issues that concern us, participate in forming the agenda that is covered in elections. So on the federal level, it takes more than just getting your ass off your chair and going to vote every 4 years. Wonder why democracy is screwed up. Wonder why there is no democracy. Then you have the Electoral College. You know, Google that. Google Electoral College. And we see this all a big setup. Like a Ponzi scheme. You know, so people get so turned off by it all that they just worry about their own individual family situation, and you know, they're not concerned about the big picture. You know, there's a general apathy, which is a social disease in America. Now, 9/11, you know, shook a lot of people up. Do we need another one for us to wake up? God forbid. You know, I condemn whoever was involved in perpetuating or bringing about 9/11. You know, I still feel sadness and empathy for all those who lost their lives. Innocent people. It was on a Tuesday. I remember that day well. And Americans haven't learned shit since then. You know, there's no strong anti-war movement in the USA. You know, people get so scattered out, you know, supporting different issues instead of sticking to a basic humane rights agenda. You know, that involves being anti-unjust war. That doesn't mean being a pathetic pacifist. One that involves that we care about other countries and the peoples of other countries, but one that involves the people here in the USA, helping the people here in the USA, helping us meet our basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, medical care, quality education, 5 basic needs. And we get so scattered out and distracted, and we don't even take care of our own people. We need to, for example, all the people who are in the USA, we need to find out, you know, who they are, where they're at, and what we can do to help them. And I don't mean NSA surveillance. We need to know who we are as so-called American people. We need to know who we are inside, those of us who are in the USA. We need integration, social integration. You need to be able to get out of your comfort zone. You know, don't just hang out with people of your own so-called race. I say so-called because we are really one race of humanity. You know, the whole concept of race is a social invention. You know, then we have ethnic groups. You know, say, I'm a Chicano de Aztlán. And among Chicanos, you see, there's differences. And among those who I consider la raza cósmica, you know, Latinos, so-called Hispanics, Mexican Americans, people who identify, say, with Puerto Rico, with Cuba, with Central America. They have a nationalist identity. Though there are no nations anymore, there's colonies or neo-colonies. So it gets a little confusing. Take the time to ponder upon these matters. Who are we? We need to be able to get rid of our racism, get rid of our bigotry. Many times, the racism is subconscious. You may not be fully conscious of you being a racist. You say you like black people, and you're a white family. When was the last time you had a black person walk through your front door? Say you're a white family and say you like Mexicans. When was the last time you had a Mexican sit down for dinner in your home? Consider that. White racism is a major obstacle to our unity because there's more of them than non-white people right now. Well, that's going to change, as time goes by. I'm descendant from Mexican native people, and we make love. Trust and believe. We have babies. Trust and believe. Catholics don't buy into the whole taking the pill stuff. And I know Chicanos males don't like wearing no rubbers. Babies are going to happen. And we just got to be responsible for what we create, as people. When a man and a woman create, say make love or have just mere sex, you're responsible for what you create. In terms of bringing a new baby into the world. Are you ready for parenthood? See, so all these elements need to be considered. So when we see ourselves, say, as Americans, we got to know who we are. Who is an American? Can someone, say, from South America be considered an American? Could be, but are they? You look at someone from, say, Colombia, and you say, oh, there's an American. No, you don't. Americans nowadays is considered white Americans. And that ain't right. So it's such a mess that some people just say to hell with it. Let's go get drunk. Let's go get stoned. Yet after that drunk and after that drug wears off, you're in a worse situation than before. So we got to take responsibility for our own lives, take responsibility for creating a true democracy, and take responsibility for creating the change that we can create, within the context of connected reality now. Revolution is a dynamic process of social evolution. Revolution is a quantum leap, a great leap forward in social evolution. Yet, it's a process. So in the process of struggling for revolution, say after the revolution, how are we going to govern ourselves if not by participatory democracy? In other words, we got to prepare ourselves now. We got to be involved in the political process. We got to be involved in voting, in elections, in campaigns. So that if there was ever a revolution, we will know how to manage our affairs. We will know how to create an ongoing dynamic democracy. Not the sorry corporate capitalist illusion of democracy you see now. I mean, a real democracy. Where, there's rule by the majority, yet there's an essential respect for the needs and desires of the minority. Because there's always going to be that conflict between the majority and the minority. So we're not even talking just about democracy. We're talking about a form of egalitarianism, true equality. Maybe this is too far ahead for some people right now. But at least comprehend the concept of democracy means ruled by the majority, who vote in the electoral process for candidates to represent them. And right now I know the whole electoral process is screwed up. So we need to get rid of the electoral college. We need to just utilize what we can now. See, this is what I mean when I speak of exhausting all legal, peaceful methods of struggle. Some of those methods may not even be legal, but at least let our methods be peaceful. Because the more of a peaceful process of change that we cultivate, the more stable that change is going to be. Instead of creating resentments that can last for generations. So let's be aware of what's being done in the name of the American people. Who is being killed in the name of the American people? Who is Obama killing in the name of the American people? Well, this is just a few thoughts I have on this November 1st. And I may post this or not. I want you to do your own videos. Right? You can cut down mine all you want. You can write any stupid comments all you want. It's like, so what? I'm expressing myself. I'm exercising my freedom of speech. Human rights are like muscles. You use them or you lose them. Power to the people.